Now I want to tell you that I'm going to bring you global greetings because, after all, we all share one village, and it is called Earth. If you know the language and you wish to respond back, I welcome that. Don't ask me too much in each language, I'm limited. But let me say, Konnichiwa, Jumbo, Sawadee-ka, Ni hao, Namaskar, Ciao, Salamat pagi, Hola, ¿Cómo estás? And hi, y'all. But you can really identify with that. Some places I go there, what is that? So it is one of those other foreign languages to many where I speak in the Northeast, perhaps. So I just want to say that whether you had planned it or not, whatever your age, whatever you do, wherever you live, your life and career will be lived out on a global stage. We all, doesn't matter if you leave your backyard or not, we all affect each other wherever we are. And I know that young people today think globally. Remember, in the dark ages when I went off to college, it was, are you leaving the state, to go to school somewhere? And it doesn't mean you have to go to another country, but it means you're always thinking about your career and your work and how it would affect people around the world, not just next door. Now, I love to, as being a first grade school teacher, and I'm very proud of that because that was before you had public kindergarten and you still had 41 and 42 in the room and you didn't say line up, you explained it. And when I worked with the state legislature one time, I received an award from the junior league. In fact, it was the Barefoot Pregnant Award, which is not very funny. But because we had a curmudgeon senator who thought that's where women should be and how they should be. And so the League of Women Voters decided that they wanted to honor women that broke that image. And someone asked me how I worked with the legislature so easily. And I said, well, I taught first grade. So, and it was no slight to them. It was that if you're a parent or a first grade school teacher at that time with no preschooling available, those are probably the toughest jobs in the world. So, and when they say, how you had an international organization with, staff in 40 countries, I said, oh, it's easy by comparison to parenting and teaching because I can delegate. I have people that really do those things for me. I just have to have the ideas and the leadership and inspire them, but I don't have to do all of it by myself. And so, but I like to use things that are kind of fun that you'll remember. And it may be this, when someone takes a picture, and they catch it like they did the World Food Prize. And I didn't mean you needed to do that, the camera. I just meant it happened. Because I'm very expressive. That's okay if you just don't pull out the funny ones and use them individually. But think about comic books and comic series and comic strips. And they have, when you have a thought, there's a bubble over your head. And so, right now, if I say sustainable development in a rural village in a developing country, I'd like to see what the bubbles look like over every head. And I think they would be quite different in many cases. So I'm going to just give you a little picture of what I say it is before and after, quickly, because I want to get into stories. Going into Honduras, I guess it's my first trip in there, and after you ride, and then you get on a donkey or something, you ride that, and then you walk, and then you finally get there to this remote spot. We went over the hill, and I looked at the village where we were getting ready to bring the goats and the training to these people, and everything looked like dust. The hillsides were slash and burn. The huts were the same color. The ground, the children, there were no animals. There was not a lot of life. I mean, I know they were wonderful people, but everything was just damn. And so we introduced the training, and we sat with them, and what are your values, and what are your plans, and, because it's their decisions what to do. It's not ours. They're the ones that own it. And when you own it, you can't stop people, and that's the key. And so anyway, we delivered the first 6 goats, and they were going to rotate the families that would milk them. The children knew which morning it was their family's turn because they get their little cups and run get in line because they got to have the first milk that day and so forth. I went back about 2 years later, went over that same rise, And I looked out and there were goats going along the trails where they had put the terraces on the hillsides, planted the nitrogen-fixing trees. They had some flowers, they had some vegetables. They had the zero grazing pen for the goats so that they couldn't get disease, run away, or destroy the environment by nibbling on it. They collected the urine and the manure through the slats underneath. That was the fertilizer for their crops and their planting. They had painted things on the side of their huts and where they lived. And they had moved the cooking outside so they wouldn't get choked by the smoke inside. And the goats all had red ribbons around their necks. The children were exercising. I mean, it was like we had gone from black and white movie to Technicolor. And that's just a tiny piece of what it is. That didn't show the better nutrition, the self-dignity, the self-reliance, that strength and independence and respect. And I mean, but it's glorious, and that's what happens. And when I tell the story of the little girl with the goat, how a goat can change a life. Our llama, the lady who gave me her photos, where she rides the llama, that changes our. Do you know how many species, by the way, that Heather works with, roughly? Anybody? Because, you know, I may give away a safari or something. I was going to do the front row, but I guess you'll be the winner, and that's it. Okay, so how many species do you suppose, even though we're called heifer? Good guess, 31. And, you know, everything from fish fingerlings to silkworms to yaks to water buffalo to camels to whatever. I mean, it's amazing. Because it's what is appropriate for the land and the environment and the resources. You know, everyone thought up in the Andes they wanted cattle. That didn't work, especially when you don't have much land. So guess what? It's guinea pigs. That's their source of protein. And I've eaten a lot of guinea pig and potatoes because that's their food. And that's where they can raise them. And in China, rabbits. Of course, only China has enough people to keep the lineage, you know, and which begat which and how many rabbits we have. But I know a man in China from 14 or 15 years ago that is now a millionaire by U.S. standards. He's been written up in the Jakarta Wall Street Journal. And he helps 250 families every year the same way. Because it's protein, it's fur. Pandas are very important in China. They use the rabbit fur to make those pandas and sell them. They never waste anything when you're working with these people. And everybody says, well, they just eat beef. And I said, I'm sorry, they don't just eat beef. That would be very extravagant. It's mostly dairy, cattle, and it's other animals for protein sources. Well, why do you give them to people in Africa? They can't handle milk, you know. I said, yes, they can. They know how. And theirs is more like they treat it like a yogurt or something like buttermilk or something that's right for their digestion. Well, what about India? You know, their sacred cow. I said, let me tell you, they may give them a root that's better than their own, but they are very dependent on that animal for their milk, for their income, for their future. So you need to go among them and you need to learn from those people. We're not making the decisions, they are. We're there to help facilitate the discussion, but we do require they decide their core values, they elect their leadership, they make the decisions, they decide which families get the first animals, they monitor it, they take those animals away if they don't care properly, give it to someone else that is prepared. And you know, the village comes together kind of like a barn raising to build a pen for the animals because they all know they're going to be down the line, they're going to be next. It's a beautiful thing to see and experience, and my life is so much richer for it. And I come home feeling very lazy, crummy, wasteful, fat, you know, all that. And so they inspire me and make me realize that an ice cube in a glass is such a joy on a hot day. Or I'm not a carpet person because of my allergy, but it feels so nice under your feet after you've felt other things under your feet as you walk through. And just eating what we have to eat. And I will not say too much to you about some of the things I've eaten, although it isn't a meal, so I'll have a little more freedom toward the end to tell you a few examples. But it is such a rich experience, and I want you to think it, read it, and know it, whether you're there or not. And agriculture, to me, is the key to the future, because we all are stakeholders in the fact that we eat. They said, who are the stakeholders who come together and help feed this planet in 2050 if we have 9 billion people? And I said, well, I'd say anyone that eats is a stakeholder. And we really need to come together, and people are going to start realizing how agriculture is so key in their lives, in all of our lives. So let me just mention one thing. When I got there, I said, okay, I know I'm a school teacher, and I want to know what is it that makes heifer special. They said, well, what do you need? You know, what do you want? I said, I just want words. What comes to mind? What are the words? And I did this globally, the team all around, which took 3-4 months. And I said, tell me what makes heifer special. What do you want? Nouns? Do you want principles? I won't care. I just want words that come to your mind. So we started doing that, and then we would kind of adjust it. And it ended up being the 12 cornerstones of our work. Now the reason, I was going to have components of our cornerstone, but when you're working cross-culture with that many languages, and you have a list, it becomes plural. So we have 12 cornerstones. But it's what the team themselves and the people in the villages said were important. And it's things like participatory decision-making, and of course passing on the gift. Oh, I love that. You know, if we could sell that on Wall Street, we'd all be millionaires. Because you get your animal and you turn around and you become a donor when you pass on the first healthy female offspring. And in India, in a ditch in southern Georgian, I was standing there, and a woman and her children, all these women had been sitting on the roadside breaking rocks so that they could, about $1 a day, so that they could build highways, and that's what they did all day long. And we came in with our goats, and they could raise the goats even in their ditch where they live because of the zero grazing and the way we teach them to take the food to them and to exercise. So she was passing on her first gift to another woman farmer, and she said, well, will you come pass on my kid? I said, no, I can't do that. Of course, she was a little stunned. And I said, I don't deserve that. I didn't raise it. I'm not the donor. You are. This is your gift. But I'll put my hand on yours, you know, to support you and tell you how special I think you are for doing this. And then I said, now, ladies, have you all ever heard of the Rockefeller family? Oh, yes. They're the rich Americans, yeah. And I said, well, yes. And they've done a whole lot of philanthropy, you know, for the arts and education and all. But I've never known one Rockefeller to give away 50% of their wealth at one time, and you just did. 50%. You own 2 goats, and you just gave one to someone else. So, of course, they were very excited all the rest of the day. They were Rockefellers and all sorts of things. And they should have been, because they were had earned that right to be proud of what they were doing for others. And, you know, it's something when you hear someone that was so hungry and so desperate say, I had no idea I would ever help someone else in their life, that I could turn around and be the giver. And one woman in Nepal said, I know when I received my first animal, my hands were on the bottom. Today my hands are on the top. I'm giving. And it was so beautiful, and there's so many beautiful things like that. And then there's also gender equity, there's accountability, nutrition, animal welfare, income, you know, all the basic things that you would think that make things sustainable. And so that's what they came up with. That's their list. And when you go to different cultures, and they might not all apply, but they select the ones that are the top values to them. Whether you're in India and you take a stick in the sand and you draw a grid, a matrix, and you say, okay, here are men, women, elders, children. Here is carrying water, carrying wood, feeding, cleaning, you know, and how to spend money. And then you take a pebble and you go and lay it. Who does all these things? Of course, the women, you know, it's just rocks after rocks after rocks. And the men, it comes down to who decides where the money goes. So then you have a conversation and you say, does that work very well? Is that good decision making? They make a decision that they need to utilize all their people power. As you know the saying that women hold up the other half of the sky, men hold up half the sky. Why aren't we using all of it to hold up the whole sky? And so they make this decision, and they realize it's better business, economically, if the women are trained, you know, there's more offspring, there's greater liters of milk, there's more, it's just on and on. It's a business thing. Of course, we know it's also a just thing to do. But they need to own it. It has to be their decision. I think it's so important what values are that I actually conducted a survey, and I did bring that to share with you quickly. I once surveyed 200 people in 45 countries, developing countries, and I wanted to learn what was most important to them in life, because that is so important. that you know what's important to you. And until you write it down or have to declare it, sometimes you haven't even thought that through very well. So you might expect to see at the top of their list such things as clean water. That may be on our list one day. Food for their children, a house instead of a hut, a small plot of land, electricity, medical care, dental care, eyeglasses, a stove, a television, a car, new clothes, and so forth. However, here are the top 10 things that were listed, not necessarily in order, but the top 10 out of all the things they wrote. Family, love, peace, spirituality, health, friendship, livelihood, education, justice, and dignity. Well, when we fully and completely understand in our hearts and in our minds that all of us across geographical, socio-economic, political barriers inherently strive for the same ideals, we have made great strides in becoming an active, equitable member of and a positive force within our global community. Now you can better understand how impressive the people are with whom I have worked. It is quite an inspiring experience to sit cross-legged on the ground in a circle discussing peace and justice issues in a rural village with those that speak another language. I'd like to mention a young girl whose life was changed by a goat. I met her 15 years ago in Kasinga, Uganda, in her village. And I'd gone in to see how things were going, what families were going to, and this is again goats. I didn't mean to pick goats in every example, but it's the same, whatever the livestock is, the same side effects, ripple effects, the same whatever's appropriate. It reaches out and changes lives. But here was this young girl in a red dress. And the thing that caught my attention was when she turned, there was no back to that dress. It had a little collar up here, and then the back was all open, and I asked why, and they said, well, they've cut that open because that's the only dress she has, and that way she can wear it a little longer as she grows. And she was wearing it because I and some others were visiting, and that was her best thing to wear. But she was carrying a lot of wood on her head. I saw where she was carrying, helping her mother go to market, and so I asked her through the interpreter what she cared about the most. What did she want to do? She said, I want to go to school. That was her dream. Of course, you pay for school in Africa. You pay fees, you pay books, you pay money. And so I said, well, your mother's going to receive goats, and perhaps one day you'll have the money to go to school. Of course she did. That's what the mother wanted to do. Everyone I interviewed, the first thing they do with their newfound income is educate the children. Number one, it's never been another answer by anybody. And so within a couple of years, Beatrice was in the classroom. She'd go and look in that little window. Now she could go inside and join her friends. She was so smart. She excelled. Immediately, within 3 to 4 years, was already ready for the next level, which we would call high school. Dick Young, a film producer in New York, had met her when he did a documentary for us, and he helped her go to high school when I think she went to a larger city for that. And then she got scholarship offers in the United States. She went to Connecticut College on a full scholarship. Then she, a year ago, graduated from the Clinton School of Public Service in Little Rock. She interned for not only President Clinton in New York and Senator Clinton at the time. Now the reason I'm saying Clinton is I just know them better, in the Bush family. I can't call them up and ask a favor, or I would, for sure. And so they wrote a story about her life, someone that went on a study tour, and that's what we do for people so they can see things firsthand, is to go and see it yourself. And it's Beatrice's Goat. And it actually was a bestseller on the New York Times, children's books, and it had to go back and reprint twice. And Simon & Schuster took her on a tour across the country where, now this is a young woman she's only been in education for a few years. She's articulate, she is amazing, she is profound, and now she's about 27, and she's been working in New York with Jeffrey Sachs, who wrote End of Poverty. and with the Millennium Villages and Millennium Promise. And that just was a goat that changed her life. And she is going to go back and change other lives. That is her dream. And when I won the World Food Prize and gave the laureate lecture, I got up and did my thing, and then I said, now here's the icing on the cake. And I introduced Beatrice, this book, and then brought her forward. And she came up and told her story. And she said, don't think it's just agriculture, even though that's really important and great. It's just the beginning of everything. It leads to education, it leads to leadership, it leads to entrepreneurship, you know, on and on. That was the tool that triggered everything. And she said, I'm so grateful and I continue to learn. What a precious, precious, amazing job. And she does not want to go back home. And they just cut back the staff, and so if she doesn't have a job by October 31st, she has to leave because, of course, has to keep her visa. And she'll have no problem because she's so smart and talented. But you know, we don't realize the other side of what happens when we give that letter in someone's name and in their honor. It is amazing how their life changes. And I have to mention one other, I don't know, Kenny, I'm so short about where I am. I can't see that. You have to show me a big letter for how much time I have. I want to take a lot of questions as why I'm doing that. So, is that a 15? Thank you. Oh, good. I did get an injection in Ethiopia, and I've had a lot of eye surgeries. They removed all the bone and all that mess. I have things in my eyelids to make them work, so I really don't see very well. But it hadn't slowed me down, thank goodness. Not much slows me down, I know. When I got up to receive $1 million from Stephen Hilton for the Hilton Prize in Washington, D.C., in front of thousands of people, you know, it's just, whoa, all these people and the photo opportunities and everything. I noticed I had a horrible bruise on my neck where I had pinched something, a stupid thing like a necklace, and pinched it. I mean, it was terrible. I can't stand up there like this. I was so embarrassed in front of all these people, in front of Steve Hilton and all, and receive $1 million check. So I took the napkin off my breakfast tray, and fortunately it was beige and not white, and tied it around my neck, you know. And, you know, later I told that story. They said, oh my gosh, you did the most amazing things. And I said, well, after all, it was a Hilton napkin. I said, you know, why not? So, I mean, I could do a whole book on those kind of things. But fortunately, I will not do that to you. But let me tell you about this one other amazing woman real quick. I went into Zimbabwe before their leader, I think, lost his mind or whatever, and he was still doing things for agriculture and things were going well. In fact, they were a model country. I thought they would be the model for South Africa, you know, as they came out of the genocide and what was happening there in Zimbabwe. But I said, when we went to the villages and all, I said, well, I want to talk to the women. So they gathered the women together in one of these villages. Because, you know, they're not in the training, they're not in the meetings. I'm going, what? So let me talk to them. So we sat down in a circle on the ground. Of course, I love that. That's when I could get up easily. I have to kind of watch that today. But I ate what they ate. You know, I mean, why not? What a wonderful experience. And I asked them their dreams. And they were startled, and they said they didn't realize they could have dreams. They didn't know they could, you know, do that, to have plans and goals. Now, the woman sitting beside me with her wonderful big head of hair was pregnant, and it was her third child, and she was just about 15. She'd been married off at 11, and that was the story with many of them. They'd never been allowed to go to school. When she did her brother's homework, her daddy found out and beat her, and you know he loved her. I mean, it was the culture. It's just unreal. And so I said, believe in your dreams, write them down, put them, you know, where you can look at them regularly, or put them in your mind, or whatever works for you, and believe in them, and you'd be surprised how you can make things happen. I don't want you to ever insult your family, your husband, your culture, but you can do it. You'll find a way to do it. So when I left that day, one of the women did write hers down. She put it on a little bit scrap of paper in a tin, looked like a sardine tin, under a rock when she was out shepherding and watching the animals. And she'd look at it. Now here's someone who'd never been in a classroom. I learned her dreams later. When we dedicated our world headquarters 5 or 6 years ago, she was working at Heifer in monitoring and evaluation. I didn't have the connection. I knew her, And she stood up before President Clinton and Governor Huckabee and our state interested, and all these religious leaders, you know, Jeffrey Sachs was there as well speaking. 2,000 people showed up at 10 in the morning to dedicate this building, and we had asked her to tell her journey, tell her story. So she did, she got up, and she said, after this woman asked me my dreams and left whatever, I wrote them down. I wrote down, go to America, get a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate degree. Now, that's a big thing if you've never been in a school room. And yeah, last year she got her doctorate in monitoring and evaluation from West Michigan. She is, well, I don't want to spoil the end of the story, but when she said, and that woman was Joe Luck and turned around, that's the first time I knew it. That had been, she called it the dream circle. And she said, we all went around saying, Tina gone, Tina gone, Tina gone. And that is, it is achievable. It is achievable. And so, when she was on Oprah, because Nicholas Kristof wrote about her in New York Times, when he wrote that article about all the outstanding women, different places in the world, the last story is Tara Trent. And someone named Joe Luck sat beside her and asked her dreams and all that. So we went on the Oprah show. We make a great team. And it was just so exciting. You know, at the end, I work, and I don't record, so I haven't seen most of the Oprah shows. When she selected her favorite, most inspirational guest out of 25 years, guess who it was? Dr. Tara Trent. So if you see her book, flip over to the most, you know, exciting guest or whatever. So they called me and said, we want to bring her back and surprise her. And so Oprah gave her $5 million to build school in her building so all the girls as well as the boys could go to school. I got an email from Tara yesterday. She's in South Africa. She'd been in an Oprah school. I think they're going to build 10 schools together, and I'm going to go when they dedicate it in Zimbabwe. She's going to name the library after me, which is so sweet. Not Oprah, but Tara. And, I mean, is that incredible? This woman that I mean, so see, you never know. And it's because she got into agriculture, and she believed in it, and she's doing evaluations and monitoring of projects and quality of work. I mean, you don't get those things in the story. Yeah, a lot of people know she's a favorite person or whatever. That's exciting, but they don't really understand that journey to get there. Or that they could have had a part in that by just donating or giving an animal or volunteering or whatever it might be. So tell me, is it zero yet? I just can't see your little paper there. It's so cute. So I want to say one final thing. Is that 10 or 0? 10. Yay! Okay. I apologize to do that to you, but I think it's so important to take your questions because it's a lot more important to know what you're thinking you want to hear than what I'm thinking I'd like to share with you. In Laos, when walking around and looking, it's kind of like the villages in Europe or many other places that I've been, you know, everyone, I just wonder, how do they select the first 6 families or 5 or whatever to receive the initial animals? And so I'm saying, well, how do you make that decision? Well, you know, they have to have completed their training, built their pens, you know, planted the fodder, blah, blah, the normal stuff, and they have to have numchi. And then, you know, I said, now wait a minute, what is this numchi? N-A-M-J-A-I, since everyone always asks me when I use that story. Tell me about that. And the interpreter kind of talked back and forth, and he said, well, I think a direct translation would be living waters in the heart. I said, I will never forget that. And from then on, whenever I interviewed anyone, besides all the other criteria, now you'll have to use this, Dean, for your future speakers, I added numchi. Because if they didn't have the numchi, all the education and brilliance and skill in the world was not going to be delivered in a manner that is going to. I said, you know, you can be brilliant, but you have to be able to communicate it. And you have to be able to walk in their shoes and know how they would receive it and how it would benefit them. So I want you never to forget your numchi. It's so critical in whatever you might do. But you know, it's like Pinagon, it is achievable. Harambe in Kenya, together we can do it. You know, I mean, I'm just so inspired when I go out there and talk to them. It's kind of like, God, what have I been doing, you know, sitting around. I'm not even a couch potato. I don't even watch TV. I don't even snack. But what am I doing? These people are awesome. And so I am energized every time I return or even get to talk about them. Then, oh, one other email I got yesterday. was from Beatrice. So precious. Actually, her name is Betty. Many people know that, but the person working on the book thought they heard her say she's Beatrice. So she's become famous as Beatrice. But so I always tell her, I don't know whether to call you Betty or Beatrice, because they told her, you better go by Beatrice, because I think you're going to be famous. So she did. But my little Betty Beatrice was trying to make a tough decision and weigh the pros and cons. And she asked my advice, whether to take a certain job or something. So I just told her that is really a lot to think about. What I'm going to do is speak to this great group, and then in the car going back to the airport, I'm going to write down questions, and I'm going to send one at a time to you. And it's not because I'm going to ever share it with anyone or anything. I want to ask some things, and then I'm going to get together some things for you to think about, because you're going to make that decision, and you will make the right decision. And whatever it is, I and others that adore you, and many of us, there's so many, she has fans all over, will support it. But how awesome to still be in touch, 15, 16 years later. And by the way, I've told you about two women, but I'm the same way with men. And every time I see an earthquake or do something, do my email, are you all okay? And Alex Curry, and Kenny will say, you truly are the mama. To be a mama in Africa is the greatest thing that we could ever call you. So I'm a mama lover. And he said, you are truly the mama. You still care about us and still follow us and still watch us. And so it is an awesome feeling. I wrote one thing, if I don't mess it up. See all this scribbled paper. Somebody always asks me about my PowerPoint. And I said, I love PowerPoints. I love images. But I speak so much in so many places where equipment won't work that I just, don't even depend on it. So I marked out some things I wrote down the other day. If I can find the second half, I'm going to read this to you because this is what my life is really about. Did any of you ever do this in classrooms? Excuse me. You can actually do that, and act like you're fumbling around, and then you say, and so in the back row, we're still in class, put that down so they'll find out you're still looking. All right, here's what I jotted down, because this is so much that I didn't want to go too far on the deep end. Over the past 22 years, I have traveled to more than 60 countries. I have slept on dirt floors, gone without bathing for several days, and prayed that none of the malaria-carrying mosquitoes would penetrate my bed netting. I've been shot at in Sniper Alley while wearing a flak jacket and running for cover. I've stayed in a remote village in Java on the side of a volcano, and it's Mount Merapi. If you'll remember, maybe 8, 9 months, maybe a year ago, the eruption, and actually the village was wiped out where I'd stayed. I mean, it was just a heartbreak for me. And I've survived an earthquake in Chiang Mai, the biggest they've ever had, been robbed in Bombay and Nairobi, missed being on a hijacked plane in Burma by 10 minutes, only time I've ever missed a plane, thank you, and have been searched at many military checkpoints throughout Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In fact, I stepped into a man's world again, and again, and again, whatever career it seemed I had. And the guys loved to tease me, when I was going over these villages, what are you going to do without your curling iron, or, whatever it might be. And so I said, please, who's the boss? Remember? No, okay. So when we'd see a checkpoint, Dr. DeVries, particularly the Dutch gentleman I used to adore, I'd say, what's this ahead now? He'd say, yeah, this is a checkpoint. I'd say, okay, what do we have to do with this checkpoint? He said, well, this one is a strip search. Oh, no, no. I said, no. He said, well, yeah, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, maybe be shot. I'm not going to do that. We're not going to have. So, they're really bad about doing that to me. And we go into Sarajevo, they're shooting at us and everything, and you can't get out of the car, go to the restroom or whatever, except guys can, and it's a different situation. And I was the only female. I mean, things like that aren't very appropriate for Southern lady to talk about, but when you've been riding for that many hours in a car, and the poor guys aren't suffering as much as you now, that is serious. So when we finally, the truck jackknifed, so we got to stop and step out for a break, one of my guys found a little place. I found a place for you to go back. I said, oh, thank you. It was an outhouse. And I said, oh, you stepped in there. And I looked out, it was on the hillside, and all of Sarajevo was out there. There was no wall in the back. But you know what? It didn't matter. That was a room with a view, a wonderful view. So you just learn, you know, to keep going with everything. And then I have photographed a charging elephant whose raised trunk and large flapping ears were only 3 feet away when the driver finally coaxed the engine of our Land Rover to start, and we sped forward just in time to escape a mother's wrath because our vehicle stalled too close to her newborn calf. I have eaten snake, yak cheese, beetles, guinea pig, and fried goat's blood in 110 degrees with a big orange tree that was hot, with a smile and a thank you to my host, because I was a guest in their home and they had generously just shared with me their very best. Thank you so much, and I'll take questions now. Yes, sir. I don't know names, so I'll point.
When you go into a village, what's been your biggest challenge as you come into some of these villages? Obviously, there's a lot of cultural differences.
Yeah.
So what do you consider some of your biggest challenges when you go into a village?
The biggest challenge is for them to understand that I too am just another person. You know, don't just be comfortable, be yourself, share your answers, ask your questions. You know, I'm not the president of the country, I'm not, you know, just let me be with you. And it took me a long time to understand, just like Tara's story, she still, every time, even over, she said, I couldn't believe this white American woman sat on the ground just like we did and ate Obama nuts or whatever, just like we did, you know. So we need to be very sure that is clear to them. In fact, I let them know how greatly I respect them because of success. I say, Heifer didn't give you a better life. You did. It's the donors to Heifer that gave the opportunity for the resources, but you did it. And we admire you and respect you. And you have to be very careful not to have strong opinions about their culture that are negative and express them. You know, like when I'd stay with them outside and ask the chief how much time he spent watering and carrying wood and all that, and he'd say, oh no, wife number 2 does that, or wife number 1, and all. And I'd finally say, wow, wouldn't it be great if they could go to the training instead of just the men? Oh no. And so I said, well, I would never want to suggest anything inappropriate in your culture or in your guests. However, you are the chief, and I think you could probably set an example. And then we talk economics, more offspring, more leaders. And I said, if you wanted to, you could just say you had a good idea and you're going to try it. Then if it's successful, you're a hero. If not, you don't do it anymore. Within 2 months, the women were going to training. But none of the wives of one man ever went to the same training. I think I understand that. But, no chit-chat. And so, but they had to do handwork to show it was a productive time. I love that. And they had to be escorted to and from. I guess the men thought that the women were going to behave as they do, rolling around. And then that's a culture thing, too. I'm not really being as catty. And that chief ended up giving me his spear. I mean, I cannot tell you what that was like. I wish he kind of hadn't told me how many lines he killed with it. But anyway, he was protecting his family, and that had been in the past. So, be in their shoes, be with them, be sincere. Yes, ma'am.
What was your inspiration, and how did you make your transition from first grade teacher to agriculture and world?
I had many transitions. I worked 50 years full time. You know, I did everything. I cooked meat, Sigmund's meat in Denver, and headed out to grocery stores. My husband was in law school, and he made beer cans for Coors, American Beer Company, you know, in the summer. Of course, now he's a federal judge, and I'm headed there now. I mean, you never know, right, what your life's going to be. I have taught 3- and 4-year-olds art. I have done sketches for newspapers. I have sold clothes at Sears at night as a student. I've done it all. I mean, when you got the job at the Equal Opportunity Office, because they needed a white person. They had too many glasses. Great for me. And because I was pregnant, and I definitely needed a job, and you couldn't teach them when you were showing, and that's sad. So And then the Arkansas Advocates thing was a great entree for me. But when I was head of Parks and Tourism, I realized about mom and pop operations and about local communities and being second crops, you know, like down southeast. Let's raise crawdads along with, you know, whatever. And then we have the Crawdad Festival. And then they did, you know, I'm very innovative, a lot of education. And I don't know the rules, and I don't know how you're supposed to do it, so that gives me great latitude. And because I was an attractive woman, no one expected anything from me, you know, intelligent. You know, they didn't realize it could come in the same package. Now I wasn't great beauty, but just attractive enough, it almost messed me up, you know. And because that didn't last forever, so you kind of look at something else going on. But there were no expectations. So when I was successful, man, then I was really successful, you know. So but that's what you've got to do. And I told the women this morning, you have to be a good role model, and you need to be sincere and don't be silly about it, and don't be, you know, humor's fine, but have great respect even for those men that pat your head, and I don't guess they do that anymore, and say, don't you worry, your pretty little head got your budget. And so you just have to know what's appropriate at what time. But when I was head of Parks and Tourism, I was afraid my brain wasn't going to be staying here, and that didn't mean anything's wrong with tourism or recreation. So I taught adults at night, ended up in a vocational class, and I said, don't tell me where you're going to be in 5 years, show me, draw a picture, cut things out, paste it on there, whatever. And it was a very popular class. About the third semester, my class said, Jill, we want to know where you're going to be in 5 years, don't tell us, show us. I said, yeah, no, we mean it. We're not leaving this room, you know, until you. They'd really got together. So that's when I walked over to the flip chart with a marker and drew a picture of me sitting on the ground in a circle, talking to women, baby, and man walking by, and chickens, and cow. And they said, where is that? I said, you know, I do not know. And after presentation, I do not know. But I know I want to be there, and I want to be making a difference. And even I was stunned. And I told that at a power breakfast 2 or 3 days later to women, you know, president of college, head of utility, you know, whatever. And about 3 or 4 weeks after that, a headhunter, which I hope you understand, recruiter out of D.C. I'm cross-cultural, I need to be all careful sometimes what we say. Call me, and, well, actually we called us 5 contacts in Arkansas that he touched base with. And the 3 out of the 5 said, oh, Joe, right off. And he said, wow, she must be qualified. Well, they'd been at the breakfast. They heard my story. And he was looking for someone to end hunger and poverty with Pepper International in the villages, you know. So he called me and asked me how I got my name and asked me the criteria. And I didn't have one thing, the criteria, none. So I told him that I'd have to take a $10,000 cut. I'm a single mother with a son and daughter who are still in school, and I couldn't afford to do that. So he said, I'll tell my employers. So he got back with me when they finally brought it down. We got 3 candidates, and they were coming to Little Rock for their interviews, and they said that the committee would like to meet with you. And I said, Richard Irish, I figured it out. You don't have a woman in the funds, and they don't have to pay for a plane ticket. I live here. I'll just do it. And I think they realized they didn't need another expert in this, that, and the other. They needed a leader, someone to raise money, to empower them, pull them together, and do things. And I was offered a job at 4:30 that afternoon. And I'm convinced it is my calling, and it was my calling. And I was preparing for that all my life. And how fortunate to be there. And I'm still going out sharing the message, and I'm on boards. I mean, people pay me to speak. Oh my gosh. I said, I have to make money. I'm supporting my 90-year-old mother as well as myself, you know, and your children, you're always doing something for them. And I'm inundated with invitations. People are hungry to know about this global world we live in and how we can make a difference. And it's going to take all of us together. If we have 9 billion people in 2050, we've got to figure out how to feed them. And you all are those experts that can help us figure that out. And is my time up? So the hook's here. I don't want to ignore anyone, but I certainly don't want you to have to be antsy because you need to go somewhere. There's a hand up, Dean. Do I take it, or, you know, since I can't see, that would scare me because I drive, you know. I even passed my driver's license. He kept saying, ma'am, that's not the right